On this V8 5.3L Silverado, P0128 means the engine coolant temperature may be staying below the range the controller expects once the thermostat should be regulating. The truck may warm up slowly, may run the cooling fan, may turn the light on, or may just show the code with no obvious drivability complaint. Broadly, this can involve coolant level or condition, thermostat operation, the engine coolant temperature sensor, or the signal and low reference circuits for that sensor. As a baseline, the ECT scan data lists parameter normal range 88 to 105 degrees Celsius, 190 to 221 degrees Fahrenheit. For circuit clues, a signal short to ground can show signal 140 degrees Celsius, 284 degrees Fahrenheit, while an open signal or short to voltage can show negative 40 degrees Celsius, negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Start with the basic system checks, then follow a structured diagnostic approach so you do not jump straight to a thermostat or sensor without proving the direction of the fault. First, make sure there is not an incorrect coolant level or coolant condition. If there's a coolant condition, correct it as needed before going any farther. If coolant level and condition are okay, look for any codes related to the engine coolant temperature sensor. If those are present, check what they mean first, because this P0128 path depends on having a believable coolant temperature input. If there is no related coolant temperature sensor code, run the engine at 1,800 to 2,200 RPM. Watch the ECT sensor parameter. It should go greater than 80 degrees Celsius, 176 degrees Fahrenheit, within 15 minutes. If the ECT sensor stays 80 degrees Celsius or colder, the diagnostic direction is the engine coolant thermostat. Test or replace the thermostat as required by the result. If the ECT sensor is warmer than 80 degrees Celsius, 176 degrees Fahrenheit, reproduce the operating conditions for the monitor, or reproduce the captured conditions from the code data. Treat those conditions as monitor gates, not as a parts list. For P0128, the monitor gates include engine off time greater than 30 minutes, fuel alcohol content less than 87%, and startup ECT between -40 and 52 degrees Celsius, -40 to 126 degrees Fahrenheit. The monitor is looking for the coolant temperature not being within its calibrated range. A useful cold soak check is that intake air temperature and engine coolant temperature should be within 3 degrees Celsius, 5 degrees Fahrenheit of each other after the ignition has been off for greater than 8 hours. Also keep in mind that high resistance in the coolant temperature sensor circuits may set this code without setting a separate sensor code. After reproducing the operating conditions, verify whether P0128 resets. If it does not reset, the system is okay at this point. If it does reset, move into circuit and sensor testing instead of guessing at the thermostat again. For circuit testing, turn the ignition and vehicle off and let the modules power down. It may take up to 2 minutes for all vehicle systems to power down before an accurate ground or low reference continuity test can be made. Disconnect the engine coolant temperature sensor connector. Test between the low reference circuit terminal 1A and ground. The result should be less than 10 ohms. If it is 10 ohms or greater, disconnect X2 at the engine control module and check the low reference circuit from the sensor harness to the control module harness. That circuit should be less than 2 ohms. If it is 2 ohms or greater, repair the open or high resistance in that circuit. If it is less than 2 ohms, the diagnostic result points to the engine control module. If the low reference circuit to ground is less than 10 ohms, turn the ignition on with the vehicle in service mode and look at the ECT sensor parameter with the sensor disconnected. It should read colder than -39 degrees Celsius, -38 degrees Fahrenheit. If it reads -39 degrees Celsius, -38 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer, turn the vehicle off, disconnect the engine control module, and test the signal circuit terminal 2B at the component harness to ground. The result should be infinite resistance. If it is less than infinite resistance, repair the short to ground on the signal circuit. If it is infinite resistance, the diagnostic result points to the engine control module. If the disconnected sensor reading is colder than -39 degrees Celsius, -38 degrees Fahrenheit, connect a 3A fuse jumper wire between the signal circuit terminal 2B and the low reference circuit terminal 2B. The ECT sensor parameter should then read warmer than 139 degrees Celsius, 282 Fahrenheit. This proves whether the controller can see the circuit pulled low through the jumper. If the jumpered reading is 139 degrees Celsius, 282 degrees Fahrenheit or colder, turn the ignition off and remove the jumper. Disconnect the engine control module, turn the ignition back on in service mode, and test the signal circuit terminal 2B at the component harness to ground. It should be less than 1V. If it is 1V or greater, repair the short to voltage on the signal circuit. If it is less than 1V, turn the vehicle off and check continuity from the signal circuit terminal 2B at the component harness to the control module harness. That should be less than 2 ohms. If it is 2 ohms or greater, repair the open or high resistance. If it is less than 2 ohms, the diagnostic result points to the engine control module. If the jumper test does make the ECT sensor read warmer than 139 degrees C, 282 degrees F, test the engine coolant temperature sensor itself. With the ignition off, disconnect the sensor and measure resistance between the signal terminal 2/B and low reference terminal 1/A. Compare that resistance to the temperature versus resistance table for the sensor. If the resistance is not in the specified range, replace the engine coolant temperature sensor. If it is in range, test between each sensor terminal and the sensor housing. That reading should be infinite resistance. If it is less than infinite resistance, replace the engine coolant temperature sensor. If it is infinite resistance, the sensor checks OK. If the temperature versus resistance values are not available during the test, pause and get the correct table before making the call. After the repair is complete, verify the repair and confirm P0128 stays gone. The key on this one is to separate thermostat warm-up verification from sensor and circuit simulation. Prove the coolant level, prove the warm-up rate, then prove the low reference signal circuit and sensor response before replacing parts. For more diagnostic training, visit stepdiagnostics.com.